random moments from the past, September 1st, 2019. It was a Midland in Texas, and then say look for this next coming up, September 1st, 2019. So this was yesterday. Today's the 21st of October, 2019. Recording this on October 21st, and this newscast at 5:29, October 21st, 2019. Dallas, Texas.
We will see the extent of damage from our storms.
We've already seen some homes and businesses just ripped apart, evidence of the destruction left behind on some of the North Texas roads as well.
Let's take a look at damage on I-35 in Dallas near Northwest Highway. Storm debris on both sides of the road, a piece of metal lying on the ground. A downed power line can be seen on the left side of your screen as well. Several drivers got caught in that storm or right after it when there was debris on the road. One of them driving that gray car you see on the right side of your screen. Damage to some Garland neighborhoods as well. This is near Shiloh Road, north of LBJ Freeway. There are trees down there.
Now, I know it said it was a tornado.
Looks like verses 10 and 11 aren't about Judah, they're about Shiloh. In other words, Judah isn't going to be disbanded until we know who Messiah is. Okay.
Damage to some Garland neighborhoods as well. This is near Shiloh Road, north of LBJ Freeway. There are trees down, many homes with roof damage. Garland police say they have no reports of any serious injuries, however. And a tornado, pretty clearly.
And it looked like a bomb went off.
I don't think we need to say may have. A tornado hit northeast Dallas last night.
Yeah, we've seen the video, yeah. Brandon Todd is live in the Lake Highlands neighborhood where a Home Depot store was badly damaged. Brandon?
Yeah, good morning, guys. The damage here in this area is evident before you ever get to this Home Depot. You can see this entire section here around Forest and Central is dark. Everywhere I look, it's dark. Power is off to everything here. Lots of businesses sustained a lot of damage, but of course behind me you can see one.
Behind you can see the monster eye and his nose and his tongue sticking out, poking out.
One of the most evident ones here, the Home Depot. I'll step out of the way so you can kind of get a look at this, but the center part of this entire building is destroyed. You've got just twisted metal where the roof used to be, and I mean, obviously, as you guys were talking about, the National Weather Service comes out, they make the official determination, but man, in the years that I've been covering these, this looks exactly like a tornado ripping right through the center of this Home Depot, and again, the best part about this is that no one was hurt, no one was injured.
And that lines up with what I was saying on September 1st about in Texas, a Home Depot with a bomb going off. With that actually taking place, I've also been saying nobody's dying in any of these events. None of them. None of these big time events happen. Nobody actually dies. And that's because back at this time, I was saying that
the world script in my hand. I got the world script in my hand. I got the world script in my hand. I got the whole world script in my hand.
We know.
Ta-da. Robin a song. Let's sing Robin a song.
So taking that in consideration, having the world script in his hand, singing me a song, Harold Camping's World. It's always about October 21st or May 21st with me.
Damage to some Garland neighborhoods as well. This is near Shiloh Road, north of LBJ Freeway. There are trees down, many homes with roof damage. Garland police say they have no reports of any serious injuries, however.
So as a Christian, what I think he's saying is, the scepter won't depart from Judah, and meaning the rulership and the passing of it, until the Messiah comes, and Messiah is going to come and bring with him the ability to call people to obedience, and they're going to obey him, and sometime subsequently later, he's going to bring back unparalleled prosperity. It doesn't tell you there's two comings, but clearly, if you know there are, they're both there. Does that make sense? I'm not trying to stretch it.
Well, there's also the playing, the script fulfiller, and then the one fulfilling it spiritually, and the other fulfilling it literally.
I'm just trying to say that would be the classical understanding of Christian scholars, and most of them would say what I just said if you go to the vast majority of commentaries. So it looks like verses 10 and 11 aren't about Judah, they're about Shiloh. In other words, Judah isn't going to be disbanded until we know who Messiah is.
in my hand.
We know.
Ta-da. Let's sing Robin a song. Let's sing Robin a song.
In Ezekiel, the writer is talking, it's a section where Zedekiah, who's the last king of Judah, is to take off the crown. And there's going to be a crown placed back on the head of someone for Judah, but he's not there yet. So Ezekiel's prophesying of the one who will take the crown. This phrase, until Shiloh comes, tells us that the rulership, the rightful symbol of rulership, whether it be a crown or a scepter, won't pass from Judah until the one that comes. And what's the end point in verse 10? He comes, and how do you know it's the right guy? What is the thing he has to fulfill? The obedience of the peoples. So there's going to come a king at some point in the future, and he's going to capture the hearts of people, and they're actually going to obey him.
Let me just go back to the
August
the
11th,
ruler of
2019.
the one that's going, the ultimate judge in the end in this Who Wants to Be America's Next Top Messiah.
Well, Revelation 10, 3 says, and I will write
21, Revelation 10 and 21.
upon you the name of the city of my God, which is the new Jerusalem, which comes down out of heaven. And then in Revelation 21, you find out, John says, and I saw the new Jerusalem coming down out of heaven, adorned as a bride. Okay, so these are all these coincidences going on with all this stuff. So now the heaven, the tree of heaven table came from Yoder, which is in New Philadelphia, which means brotherly love.
See it throughout the Bible, but you see it throughout poetry. Generally, a lion is considered a king or a ruler. And you'll see whether it's the city of Florence or whether it's people having them outside their front door in Philadelphia. You see them all over the world. It means protection, but it generally also means someone in charge. When I think he was named after Leah's conclusion that she needed to be okay with what God made her and stop trying to get Jacob in her bed and stop trying to get Jacob to love her more than he loved Rachel. That wasn't going to happen, and using children to get the man was the wrong-headed thing to do. So finally she stops and says, let me call this one praise, and quit for a while. She comes back to the problem, but at least for the time being, she seems to have overcome it. She figured out that nobody could complete her. That God alone had to complete her. Look at verse 8. Judah, your brothers shall praise you. What's he doing? That's a play on words, right? Praise, your brothers are going to praise you. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons shall bow down to you. That means your brothers,
Today's
right?
December 3rd.
Why doesn't he say your brothers? Because then we'd have a distinction between brothers and half-brothers. And he says, Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He couches, he lies down as a lion, and as a lion, who dares rouse him up? Now watch. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until Shiloh comes. And to him shall be the obedience of the peoples. Christian, what I think he's saying is, the scepter won't depart from Judah, and meaning the rulership and the passing of it, until the Messiah comes, and Messiah is going to come and bring with him the ability to call people to obedience, and they're going to obey him, and sometime subsequently later, he's going to bring back unparalleled prosperity. It doesn't tell you there's two comings, but clearly, if you know there are, they're both there. Does that make just different kids? You came out of the box that way. And what I want you to see is God didn't treat the creative explorer child as a problem.
I feel like the class that he's teaching, the people that are actually there, are part of those that have the host body, or even the children of those that had babies.
He made the man to add something unique to the whole scene. He used the man in important ways, but few people would ever hear of it. You know why? Because explorer children are often like that. They go out and do the cool thing, but only 3 people ever knew about it. Okay? If that's you, get used to it. What is that? Well, here's the thing. Dan becomes a barometer of the family, living first near the Philistine plain. You got to take on wars you can't finish in 2 years because some people have been around fighting for 500.
I mean, some people seem like they really have been living this long.
You might be careful about that. Let me go to Son of Disruption, since we have no disruptors.
May 9th, 2017.
Dan
Back to Dan.
shall judge his people. As one of the tribes of Israel, Dan shall be a serpent in the way, a horned snake in the path, that bites the horse's heels so that his rider falls backward. For your salvation I wait, O Lord. What is that? Well, here's the thing. Dan becomes a barometer of the family, living first near the Philistine plain. You got to remember where Dan actually got his first living. Dan was originally given a territory right here. This is all Philistines.
That looks like. No.
Will
Whoops.
What happens to the tribe that inhabits the hill that looks at the Philistines?
I mean, there is property over here. This is 24th Street, Park Place, high-end, but that's a serpent in the path. That accidentally. But
Do you know that there was not a single African ever who was unhappy about not having TV until they saw one? People aren't upset about what they don't have until they know they don't have it, and you do. Here's the problem with living in the mountains, looking at the people who have when you don't. Then you decide you want to be them. And Dan lost this territory to them. They took it over, and Dan ended up way up here, taking an area all the way at the north part of the country.
now what he just drew there is a cockroach, I believe, bug with its feet wrapped around and its antennas.
To know that they become a barometer of the family. Who are the children of Dan? A fellow by the name of Shimshon or Samson. There's a classic Danite in Judges 13. What's Samson's problem? It's certainly not gym time. He's doing fine.
So if you look at Samson, according to this script, it would be someone that is muscular.
What's his problem? Self-control would definitely be on the list of problems. I mean, it's not bad enough that he's got the coolest hairstyle in town and the biggest muscles.
So he would also have the coolest looking hair. Whoever has the coolest hairstyle and the biggest muscle would be put into that position to fulfill that part of the script. But there's also always others that are just put in place to play somebody else as well, to keep it confusing, because this is the land of confusion. I'm sure up in heaven, the Bible is, all the truth is spread out through everybody in literal heaven.
He's got to also have the girl, right? And the thing about him is he plays around with what's holy. God told him, don't cut your hair. So he gets into a little debating society with Delilah about, well, if I'm tied up this way and they get me, then I won't be able to get out of it. And then, you know, about the third time that woman set you up, would you stop playing around with it already? You can't rest on that. You got to go out and make this next generation your generation. Let me go to the unsettled son so I can get us to the break. 49:27. Benjamin. And of course, he's also from Rachel or Rachel, son of my right hand. Now,
Son of my right hand.
look, you're thinking Benjamin. He's so warm. He loves Benjamin. He spent so much time. Listen to what he says. He's a ravenous wolf.
It's a Benjamin.
In the morning, he devours the prey, and in the evening, he divides the spoil. I want you to see that Benjamin was a wolf on the prowl. He was unsatisfied and he was searching for something he couldn't find. He would devour his enemies and divide their spoils, and you'll see that in Judges. In the evening, he divides the spoil. I want you to see that Benjamin was a wolf on the prowl. He was unsatisfied and he was searching for something he couldn't find. He would devour his enemies and divide their spoils, and you'll see that in Judges 20. We're going to see that in Judges 20. I'd put it right next to 49:27, Judges 20. His nature is more seen by like Saul of Tarsus than King Saul. Both of them, by the way, are acclaimed in his ranks. So the Apostle Paul is a Benjamite, but so is King Saul. Let me say this. Failure to settle down is going to keep his family stirred and looking at the future without the present. So you can't be a ravenous wolf and eat life. Today needs to be, you have to be able to stop. I know it's that cliche, smell the roses or whatever. Maybe that's not it. But at least once in a while, see a sunset. You know what helps me? Music. A beautiful piece of music or an incredible piece of art. I like some poetry, but you got to really be good to get me.
Like an address.
Usually look at Genesis as though it is a map. And the whole idea is, as you finish Genesis, you finish the map book.
The whole idea.
A map usually lays out the landscape and tells you where things are going. And really, by the time I get to the end of this book, it looks to me like the whole issue of chapter 50 is that the mature believer views his or her life as an opportunity for God to work through them, not as an opportunity to live for themselves. It's just a very normal surrender dialogue, if you will. And look at the first 3 verses of chapter 50, because I want you to see the setting. The setting is actually 1 to 13, but I want to zero in on the first part of the setting. Famine is severe in the land of Canaan. And here's the thing. In learning to pivot, you have to read people well. You know what? I'm going to do this too fast, and it's way too important for that. If there is a skill you can develop, if there is a skill every one of you needs to develop to be successful, learn how to read people. Learn how to read people. It's more important than learning how to read books. I don't care if you're illiterate, learn how to read people. Reading people is the difference between a good worship leader and a bad one. 2 people can love God immensely and worship Him intensely personally, but only one guy can lead a group. Why? Because you got to be able to read more than just music. You got to be able to read people. Have you ever been in a room where you knew the person was talented musically, but they weren't pulling you in worship. It might be something's wrong in their heart, but more often than not, it's something's wrong in their ability to read people. And I'm telling you, one of the things that Joseph learned through trouble was how to read people. Some of you haven't had a lot of trouble in your life, and you don't read people very well. It is a skill that people in companies will pay extra for. How many of you would say that some of your classmates are the kind of people that make you feel at ease? That's just their personality. Anybody like that? Who's a make you feel at ease person? Pharaoh gave them a specific place to live, and Joe complied with the order specifically. I see that in verses 5 and 6. I also see it in 11. It says, Pharaoh said to Joseph, your fathers, your brothers have come to you. The land of Egypt is at your disposal. Settle your father and your brothers in the best of the land. Verse 11, Joseph settled his father and brothers and gave them possession of the land of Egypt in the best of the land. He did exactly what he was told. There's a reason Pharaoh trusted Joseph. What he said, Joseph did.
I'm sensing a Joseph in the end, according to this world script, but there's also other signals as well.
If you're going to remake the rules behind your boss's back, your boss isn't going to trust you. That's what's going to happen. The things you have to do is rely on your thoughtful understanding that you've developed through listening. How did Joseph come to know that Egyptians loathed shepherds? By the way, why do Egyptians loathe shepherds? There's a simple reason. It is dirty work, but you know, I got to tell you, being a Nile farmer is not exactly clean. And since you're using manure to, fertilize, fertilize, it's not that the shepherds smell worse.
So the shepherds are the ones seeking other pastures.
What's the difference between the way a shepherd and a farmer makes a living? Farmer's very much about localization, right? You work the same piece of land, you guard the same piece of land. What are the enemies of a farmer? Weather and animals. So the reason they're loathsome is the sheep constantly wander off and eat their crops. So there's tension between them. There is tension when there's an opposite economic system. By the way, I'm not just talking here. Do you know that later on, God will promise them, I bring you into a good land, a land flowing with what? Milk. Think shepherds, because goat's milk is what you got your milk from, goats and then camels, which, by the way, makes great ice cream. The cows, much, much later. There isn't a lot of grazing in the Middle East, so you don't raise a lot of cows. There were cows in Egypt because they had the Nile. They always had a place to get water. But I bring you into a land flowing with milk is a land of shepherds. I bring you into a land flowing with what? Honey. Honey comes from agriculture. It comes from bees, which come from pollination. So
Filling up your hollows, the beehive.
So I bring you into a land that has both shepherding and farming. Why is he telling them that? Because that's going to be a blessing and a curse. Shepherds and farmers don't get along. By the way, in the history of Israel, if you go back and look at it, if you look, I think the other thing is you get down to the second half of verse 34, and one of the things you have to do is rely on your thoughtful understanding that you've developed through listening. How did Joseph come to know that Egyptians loathed shepherds? By the way, why do Egyptians loathe shepherds? There's a simple reason. It is dirty work, but you know, I got to tell you, being a Nile farmer is not exactly clean. And since you're using manure to, going to give to the youngest son more than he gives to everyone else. And the one way to look at it is to go, wait a minute, isn't that favoritism? But this is not a son, it's a brother. But isn't that favoritism? Yeah, but this is the brother that wasn't culpable in any of the story. And this is the one full brother he has when the others are half-brothers.
Wasn't culpable in the whole story.
It's a brother. But isn't that favor more than he gives to everyone else? Okay. There's a problem with this. And the problem is that he's going to give to the youngest son more than he gives to everyone else. And the one way to look at it is to go, wait a minute, isn't that favoritism? But this is not a son, it's a brother. But isn't that favoritism? Yeah, but this is the brother that wasn't culpable in any of the story. And this is the one.
As if, I think he was talking about, who are you talking about, Benjamin?
Your father and
Get
come.
the context of this.
Do not concern yourselves with your goods, for the best of all the land of Egypt is yours. Then the sons of Israel did so, and Joseph gave them wagons according to the command of Pharaoh, and gave them provisions for the journey. To each of them he gave changes of garments, but to Benjamin he gave 300 pieces of silver and 5 changes of garments.
Yeah, and then earlier he was talking about how Benjamin was unsatisfied, but
Okay.
but once the inheritance takes place.
Problem with this. And the problem is he's going to give to the youngest son more than he gives to everyone else. And the one way to look at it is to go, wait a minute, isn't that favoritism? But this is not a son, it's a brother. But isn't that favoritism? Yeah, but this is the brother that wasn't culpable in any of the story. And this is the one
Like he had nothing to do with throwing Joseph in the pit.
full brother he has when the others are half-brothers. And in the end, it says that they loaded them down 10 donkeys in verse 23, 10 female donkeys loaded with grain, bread, sustenance. Verse 24, he sent his brothers away, they departed. Do not quarrel on the journey. Underline that one, you want that verse. Do not quarrel on the journey. Brothers away, they departed. Do not quarrel on the journey. Underline that one, you want that verse. Do not quarrel on the journey. So as they departed, the last thing Joe says as they're taking off is, don't fight, boys. Get along. What's interesting is Joseph is still in charge. Did you notice that? He's not the oldest. He's the second to the youngest. But he's the oldest to the second wife. And he is, if after Reuben, he would be the next in line for the birthright. And he's already taking over, and you don't see Reuben saying anything. Then they went up from Egypt and came to the land of Canaan to their father Jacob. They told him, Joseph is still alive. Indeed, he's ruler over all the land of Egypt. He was stunned, and he did not believe them.
Then, what was it? He said there's still 5 years left, and this was after 2 years. So that would be towards the end of the second half of the 7 year, because he interpreted the dream that 7 good years, those 7 cows, those ones that were eating the other ones, and it represented the first 7 years. And then the next 7 years.
Why? Their reports on Joseph had heretofore been utterly lies.
And let's say they were telling Jacob that he died because they withheld any of the truth, any truthful information. They withheld it. So they told him that he died, but then afterwards they told him that he didn't die, like as if he was resurrected.
Now they're going to...
Because to the father, to Jacob, that's how it seemed, like he was living again.
Get this old man's heart beating, and he's not going to get his hopes up based on the words of his boys. You know why? Because when you tell lies, there's a penalty even when you tell the truth. It's the boy who cried wolf syndrome. If you go further down, the sons of Issachar is the word reward, joined or apportioned. It's either to cut apart or to join together. Like to cut apart in a specific portion. Their treatment to trained specialists. Damaged psyches aren't the chief problem. The chief problem is disconnected souls. What we need is connection. What we need is a healing community. I don't know if you know this, but you guys have had a harder time making friends than we did. I don't really know why.
This proves my theory earlier.
My observation is that that with each class that comes through, there's something about the period of life that you're in that some of you are so wrapped in trying to figure out what God wants you to do that you forget that you're part of a room full of people who are also wrapped in the same contest. And you're not running against them, you're running against the you you're supposed to be. And somehow we don't connect the way we're supposed to connect.
So the people in the class are wrapped up in the same thing.
How that played out in his kids? Jacob thought he could manipulate and gain control. His sons just assumed that whatever they were doing was all in their control. Joseph is the one who says, I don't think you see this. Heaven and earth are attached. And that's the Jacob lesson from the beginning. In Joseph, the righteousness of Jacob shines. In the other boys, the foibles of Jacob are apparent. Verse 9 says, hurry and go to my father and say to him, thus says your son Joseph, God has made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, do not delay. You shall live in the land of Goshen. You shall be near me, you and your children and your children's children and your flocks and your herds and all that you have. There I will also provide for you, for there are still 5 years of famine to come, and you and your household and all that you have would be impoverished.
So that means that when Joseph when he told the king about his dream with the 7-year famine, good years, and then the last 7 of the thin years, he's talking about it 2 years in, 2 years, 2 full years from the first 7. And then the next, so he's saying at that time that there's 5 years left. If you take 2011, 2018, the first 7, then the next 7, and within the 2-year period, 2020, 2021.
Behold, your eyes see, and the eyes of my brother Benjamin see, that it is my mouth which is speaking to you.
But if you remember before,
they didn't talk at each other, they talked with each other. This is the first time. Do you remember? Last time, they couldn't even listen to his voice. He absolutely made them sick when he spoke. That's how jealous they were of him. Now, years later, Joe tells them the story of what's happened, and they sit there and ask questions and they move from being brothers to being friends. But what opened the door to being friends? Grace. He gave them grace and restored the relationship, and then he had it. Carry your hurts, and you'll carry your enemies. But it's also not taking blame for the wrong. Behind the problem openly being exposed, there's a third practical solution that's extended here. And what I love is, look at the way it works. It works, divine perspective is shot into the breach. Look at verse 5. Do not be grieved or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. I love that. Yeah, you sold me, but don't, feel badly.
He's going to make a reference to something that's similar to happened with Christ. And And it's also, at that point, it's like, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do.
Sent me before you to preserve life. You didn't even know it. You were just doing something God wanted done. You're going to see this come up again with Peter's speech to the Sanhedrin in Acts. He's going to say, you killed the Prince of Life, but you really didn't know. You were doing the things that were foreordained beforehand. You're not.
As to parallel similarity, so whoever is playing Joseph, the character right now, I would just assume that he's also playing Jesus, and then whoever's playing Jesus is playing Daniel. So they're all intertwined together. As they killed Joseph, then forgive them, for they know not what they do. You were just basically, just like when Peter told them that you killed the Prince of Peace.
Not saying they're not responsible. You're saying that there's another perspective in this.
Because as the stories go, this person over here, like Daniel, he was just thrown in the lion's den. And that was the only attempt of ever anything. But they found no hurt on him. With Daniel. With Joseph, they just threw him in the pit, and then they stalked him, and they gave him a hard time, and then Potiphar's wife, I think that's his name, came after Joseph. She lunged herself at him, but he just was like, oh, what you doing? And then she wound up lying and saying that he was trying to get her, and then that brings a whole lot more gang stalking in his direction in order to put him in prison. So he put the crown of thorns around your head, and you're in prison for that time. Then you start to interpret the king's dream by word of mouth to the baker. You're telling the baker, but he must not have been given the right bread. And then the other guy was pouring the cup in the jail cell with Joseph. He was the one that winded up saying something to Pharaoh. Oh, afterwards. He didn't do it right away. He did it afterwards. And then that's what got Joseph out, which was the interpreting of the dream, 7-year famine, 7 good to 7 bad years of famine.
Another hand in the story. And
as you know in the story, Joseph never died. Daniel never died. Christ never, his body didn't see corruption. But the perception is what everybody believes happened to him in a literal sense.
Verse 6 says, for the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there are still 5 years in which they will be neither plowing nor harvesting. Now, the boys are not at this point going to go, excuse me, Joe, exactly how do you know this is going to go on 5 more years? Because so far, their ability to see the future has pretty much panned out to the opposite of everything that happened. And Joseph is running Egypt.
So as the 2 years, and then 5 more left, but that's when Joseph is in charge at that 2-year period. So the next 5 years, it's not going to be so bad for them.
So this is not the time to think, Joe, you get it wrong and we get it right. No, we get it wrong and you're doing okay for yourself. So they do. He's saying that compared to your actions, God was at work, and that's the more powerful of the two aspects of the story. He has made me a father to Pharaoh and lord to all of the household and ruler of the land of Egypt. You know what I love? Verse 5 is a word of grace. He allowed them to see that they were not alone in control of his fate. That God was at work and there was grace even to the guilty. And verses 6 and 7, he opens the door to the whole set of lessons. Because in a sense, the experiences were allowing them to see a perspective that reshaped how they viewed God. Following God's prompting to get involved in ministry with people. It's whatever God calls you to do, it's all in. I think in I have the word next to verses 8 to 27. That's a long stretch, but look at it very closely. I have the word real men relate. Let me show you what I mean. next to verse 8, let me see, do you have the words of Leah in 46:8? No. Okay. I would put next to verse 8 of Leah. These are the names of the sons of Israel. And Reuben, look a son. Shimon, hearing. Levi, apportioned or joined. Yehudah, Judah, praise. If you don't have the meanings of the names, I will stop and slowly give them to you, but you need to put them into the text. So we have to just stop. Now, I noticed this in verse 24, that God often allows someone to try all of the other avenues, whatever way they suppose it's going to work. I think exhaustion is a stage of God's work. Now, I want you to go out here on a limb with me because I can't tell you this is true. It looks to me like exhaustion is one of the stages of God's work. And then it goes, you shall be over my house. Now, for the first time in Joseph's life, things start coming together. Oh, I was in charge of Potiphar's house. Oh, I was in charge of a prison before. I've run people before. I can get this done. I've run people that were conniving thieves, thieving prisoners before. I can get this done. I can work in government. Why? I've worked with thieves before. I can do this. And then Pharaoh said to Joseph, see, I have set you over all the land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh took off his signet ring from his hand and put it on Joseph's hand and clothed him in garments of fine linen and put gold around his neck. And he had him ride in his second chariot. And they proclaimed before him, bow the knee. And he set him over all the land of Egypt. Do you know what would have happened in verse 43? Do you know what would have happened in verse 43 if God hadn't humbled this man over a series of years?
June 28, 2016.
When you go too fast all the way to the top, your head goes with you. So the years spent that seemed like they were a waste of time, what God was doing was shaping the life of Joe. So that when Joe's finally thrust into the limelight, they can put him under the hot lights. They're not going to find anything wrong. Go past you because you're going to get busy with the responsibilities of life and not be able to play with the latest electronic gadget. And there's going to be some 5-year-old schooling you in how to do it. Real men and women of God learn. Their ego is not so wrapped in what they know that they... Listen, let me say it to you in this way. You show your maturity when you're in the room and you don't have to have an answer. Things are going well. And so now Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt.
So that's 3 years, 365 days, 3 years, all the way up until the 4th year, 3 full years.
Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh. So what I just saw was the last 13 years of his life changed everything about who he was. And now he's riding a pretty good ride. He's got a nice, some nice bling. And he's really, he's pulling it off. And verse 47 says, during the 7 years of plenty, the land brought forth abundantly. So he gathered all the food in 7 years, which occurred in the land of Egypt, placed them in the food stores in the cities. He placed in every city the food from its own surrounding fields. Thus, Joseph stored up grain in great abundance like the sand of the sea until he stopped measuring it, for it was beyond measure. Now, before the year of the famine came, two sons were born to Joseph, whom Asenat, the daughter of Potipharah, the priest of On, bore to him. Joseph named the firstborn Manasseh, for, he said, God has made me forget all my trouble and all my father's household. And he named the second one Ephraim, for he said, God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. It's what's going to make the metal reliable. Joseph was being prepared to run the entire nation of Egypt. He just didn't know it. And I knew what he wanted me to do. I knew that what would be more rewarding to me is watching your life. I want you to know that. We're not done this year. I keep watching. It's like you got a stalker in your life. But see, when Mike Bagby some years ago came to me and said, what is it you want to do in ministry? What draws you? I said, I don't need to be the guy who does it. I just want to be the guy who helps the guy do it. But sometimes it's not them. Sometimes God settles in your life and challenges you in a unique way at moments in your life. If he did it all the time, it wouldn't be special. He does it at special moments in your life. And so they marked it. They said, okay, now, so here's the thing. I will know if God met you if at the end of the service I see you going outside and bringing in rocks and piling them up on your seat. And then I will know that you had a special moment of worship.
I showed you Jerusalem for a reason, because the Lord just gave me 2 identical rocks to the ones I just had done. I was like, what? Identical.